Crowdfunding is uniting contributors and project creators all over the globe. Let's hear what's happening from our global experts.
There's no question this is a long-term economic strategy. It's here to stay. It'll be interesting to watch the marketplace as it grows in the coming years. We're still seeing new crowdfunding sites launch almost every day. It blows my mind that so many years into this marketplace, people are still innovating. It'll be interesting to see if those new players are able to bring something so different, so compelling, that they find a meaningful place in the market. We get very excited about companies like Indiegogo and Kickstarter and GoFundMe, who are really the three big giants in the crowdfunding space. But even though I call them giants, they're relatively small businesses still.
As what we're kind of seeing as more established companies are going to be getting into the space, it's going to go more mainstream. From a donation rewards perspective, we're already seeing early adopters, from the Warner Brothers Veronica Mars movie, where the studio actually let the fans kind of pre-fund the movie. I think we're going to see a lot more larger companies use it as a way to almost skip the focus group and some of the market research and go straight to their potential customers to pick the different feature sets, right? If are they wondering if red will sell more than blue, or what kind of how they should roll this out? Their crowdfunding campaigns will not only pre-fund their R&D efforts and kind of the commercialization there, but it will also allow them to identify what potential products will have the best sales. So I think that's one thing from a donation rewards perspective that we'll see a lot more of here in the future. And then from an equity perspective, I think that more mainstream companies are going to, kind of better funded startups or more promising startups, or the startups that would have gone to the VCs are going to start using this pretty soon because they're going to see it's a very quick way to get capital.
Crowdfunding for me was something I started in the early 2000s. I didn't know the word crowdfunding, never heard of it. But we were already doing it, where we were helping investors come together and participate in good real estate investments. And really, when crowdfunding kind of became a buzzword probably around 2010, we'd already actually formed Wealth Migrate, and we were already doing what we're doing today. But obviously it's getting easier and easier as the legislation is becoming clearer, and that's allowing us to extrapolate and grow around the world. There's been, obviously I've seen in the press, there's been some deals in America that were done in 24 hours, and you read about these different campaigns. We've tended to focus on slightly bigger deals. The average, if you look at the Mass Solution report, the average deal in 2014 was about $950,000. Our average equity investment's about $4 million. So we tend to play in a slightly different space. But certainly, as I said, it's gone from anything from 24 hours to when I was in Hong Kong, one of the Chinese partners was there, and they'd raised something like $1 million in less than 20 minutes. Well, I've just been invited by the World Bank to talk in Beijing. And in fact, the gentleman that's running crowdfunding for the World Bank is putting on an event in Beijing with some of the funders from around the world talking to the Chinese government. I think once the likes of the World Bank and them are getting involved, I think that we're going to see some pretty significant changes. As you know, in America, some of the big listed funds and REITs are starting to get involved. The bottom line is this needs to change in a perception from a mom and pop and a bunch of little IT 20-year-olds in a garage putting some stuff together to when you've got the heavyweights of real estate realizing that the bottom line is it's no different to Henry Ford. We were driving Volkswagens, cars came along, and it's an inevitable change.
Yeah, China has a small committee of 200 people meeting to discuss how they're going to deal with equity crowdfunding, alternative finance in China. Their premier, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I'll butcher my Mandarin, but the premier of China has said that financial innovation is the key to the next 30 years economy, which is based on innovation, not on manufacturing. So the government is trying to figure out a set of policies to encourage financial innovative products. Most of the demand over there is debt, not equity, but there's huge demand. Most of Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, lots of countries over there are looking at equity crowdfunding, and they see it as a vehicle for financing their innovative companies. And if you will, they want to compete with China, but it's also just a new mechanism. There's not a lot of venture capital in that world. In the Middle East, equity crowdfunding is Sharia compliant, and there's some discussion happening with Islamic finance funds to see if they can use equity. And there's something like 27 platforms in the Middle East already. I mean, there's already crowdfunding happening there. But the more interesting question is there a way of mobilizing the massive amounts of capital sitting in the sovereign wealth funds to maybe do co-investing with, or to somehow syndicate investing with the crowd to promote job creation in the Middle East? So it's an economic discussion and a political discussion, not just a small business and finance discussion. Latin America is just starting. They're the slowest to Africa and Latin America are both really late to the game. There is some equity crowdfunding in South Africa, and you're seeing some interest in other parts of Africa, but primarily you're still seeing debt and rewards and donation models. Home Strengths is a phenomenal company headquartered in the UK, operations in the US, that raises money from accredited investors to invest in African firms. And they're doing a phenomenal job, and they're probably the best in the world at using diaspora investors and sort of linking international partnerships back into local investment opportunities. In Latin America, there's a first major conference that's happening in September. There's been a few speaking events, but like a truly regional meeting with governments and major banks and major think tanks. That's happening, I think, September 20th and 21st of this year down in Medellin. So the region is starting to think about what they can do more, and we're starting to see some harmonization there. The UK is obviously the world leader, and they have the best, which is not saying they're great laws, but they have the most workable set of laws right now, and their market's the most innovative. I know in Canada you recently have passed, I believe 6 of the provinces have it today, and then there's 2 or 3 more talking about it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Mexico has a group working on it, and they already have crowdfunding. I think there's something like 9 or 11 platforms operating. In Latin America, we're seeing a massive interest in the arts and not much interest in financing business. And they have a huge amount of crowdfunding for arts and creativity right now. So Western Europe, well, actually most of Europe has crowdfunding. The European Commission has come out in support of crowdfunding, and they made it part of their policy plank. The problem is you have 26 countries, and you have this little problem in Greece and Spain and some other areas. So I don't expect that you're going to see this to be a high priority, but they think of the digital economy as being the key to their economy. So they have this, I can't remember if it's Web 2020 or Digital 2020 initiative, and explicitly within that initiative is a discussion of crowdfunding. And so they had a report issued very recently in conjunction with the European Crowdfunding Network that's probably the best report I've seen looking at the policy rationale to support crowdfunding as a tool of economic policy. So I'm encouraged that the European Commission might actually have some pan-European legislation. Now, Italy has already passed laws that allow any EU member to raise funds on their platforms. So if you will, my joke is they're becoming the Switzerland of Europe. So we're seeing a lot of activity there. Germany is actually moving the other way, and they're talking about becoming more restrictive and tightening the screws on regulation. So I think you're seeing, the Netherlands has a lot of leaders in the space, but not a lot of economic activity. But in terms of thought leadership, it's somewhere between, the Netherlands and the UK right now. So a lot of countries are looking at the models, and I think you'll see probably 20 or 30 countries adopt equity crowdfunding in 2016. I think you're also seeing a lot of discussion around the shadow banking and alternative finance worlds, and that's probably getting a lot more regulatory attention right now because of the scale of the funds flowing through those platforms. But in fact, there's a meeting I'm helping to co-organize in Washington, D.C. in November. Meeting, I think 50 or 60 nations are sending regulators to talk about how to deal with the policy implications of alternative finance.